Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We are in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show. I'm Andrew Willett, and today, for the first time, we are having a returner on a pro basketball show, Nit Andre. We are all set to talk about some Las Vegas Aces and some WNBA power rankings, and we're going to do so with Nit, who does quite literally everything: NBA, WNBA, NCAA, men's and women's basketball, high school hoops. Just going through his portfolio, so much that he does, and you can find his podcast at MNC Hoops. Nit, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. It's a pleasure to be back on, man. The W season is just kicking off, and I'm really excited to talk.
We're going to get into Las Vegas like we did in the preseason preview. Now we're 4 games in, as well as get into the power rankings. I've been excited to get to some of the power rankings. It's just a fun little activity we're going to get to do. But starting off with LV, I think it's only fitting to touch on them first because they are first in the WNBA so far, only undefeated team at 4-0. And that win differential through 4 games, I believe it is the largest win differential ever at a plus 99. They take down LA twice, Minnesota, Seattle, not great teams, but they did what they were supposed to do. It's a championship team, and I think at this point they're only going to get better as Candace Parker, Alicia Clark, and others get a little more acclimated. But for you, Nick, what's kind of stood out to you so far for LV?
I think it's just really the familiarity as far as getting to know one another on the court. I think that's really what it has been for me. And I think we're really seeing, team or the players just really locked in, just, being engaged into both ends of the floor, especially defensively. I mean, there's a lot of defensive tandems on this team, from Candace Parker to Asia Wilson to Alicia Gray, Kia Stokes, even Jackie Young, in my opinion, has elevated her defense as well through the course of this season. So, even though these are not necessarily playoff contending teams that the Aces have faced these first 4 games, you got to give credit to them for really taking advantage. This is really a head start, for what's coming, because next week they have to play Connecticut twice, and that's another team who's really up there with them defensively. So, I'm really excited, from what I've seen throughout the first 4 games, and we'll see if they can only continue to improve as the season progresses.
Yeah, with this LV team, Connecticut is one. We're excited for those tests coming up because that's a team that we're going to get to talk about next week here on a pro basketball show. As you said, for today, the Aces, I think like the continuity that they have, but I think it's the perfect complement of players around each other. I think Candace Parker and Asia at times can have a almost whose turn is it now? But they're controlling the paint on defense and on offense. One of them can shoot. One of them was last year's MVP. Chelsea Gray just doing whatever she wants on offense. Kelsey Plum, I think, is an amazing weapon to have as almost a second or third option out there. The way that she can just go get buckets, and then that's just created a space where Jackie Young has stepped into. And we'll talk about her too, but as the 5th option, the aggressiveness, the confidence from outside, it's kind of making this team unbeatable in a sense. But along with the bench, I love Alicia Clark, Kia Stokes, Raquana Williams. This has been a lot of fun to watch so far. Is there anything that's kind of stood out to you as maybe a weakness that we've seen or you expect to see?
I can't really find any weaknesses offensively. I think they're really clicking on all cylinders. Of course, there are some flaws, and I think as the season progresses, they will continue to improve. But I think the only knock that I may have on the Aces is probably defensively, and I guess you could say because even before I came on the show, I watched all of the Seattle game, and I went back to watch a little bit of the Sparks game in LA, and I think there's like a few times where they had, some miscommunications on transition baskets defensively. And then there was one particular play that I actually watched before I got on here. It was against the Sparks, where Lex Brown was bringing the ball past half court. Aces are clearly in the zone. You have Chelsea Gray covering her, and then Lexi brings the ball down to the right wing. De'Erica sets a ball screen, and Jackie Young is right there. I think Jackie Young was anticipating the switch, but then Chelsea actually over the ball screen, which does lead up to a possible slip for De'Erica to an easy basket at the basket. So I think there's a little bit of miscommunication as far as maybe the zone coverage. But I think overall, I mean, I think overall, when everything's right, the rim protection's there, the perimeter defense. So there's not really a lot of flaws. I mean, of course, there are some miscommunications on a few possessions, but overall, I like what I'm seeing from the Aces overall.
I think defensively is probably a good place to start because, like you said, even going back and watching, I think it was the Minnesota game, most recently, where they almost started off so well that in the second and third quarters, it was as if they weren't really locked in defensively, and I see moments like that too. But I think especially some of those miscommunications, probably just some of the early season didn't know each other. Going to continue to lock those things down. I know Becky Hammond's going to be all about that. But I kind of am not so concerned about those. I don't know about you defensively. Do you see any holes?
I don't see many holes, and if there is, I have no doubt that the Aces can figure it out. I mean, you can't tell me that they're not, in practice watching film. It's like I mentioned earlier. There's so many defensive tandems. There's a lot of great players who can set the tone defensively, especially when you have a player like Candace Parker, who's a great communicator on the defensive end. So she's calling out ball screens. She's doing this. She's doing a lot of things on the defensive end. So if there is any flaws, I'm sure that it's probably her or Asia or whoever's testing them. They'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, so I guess kind of having CP on one side and having Asia on the other, it's just completely unfair on that defensive side. Their drop coverage seems to be what they're settling into. At least it was against Minnesota for sure. That might just be a matchup, but when you can do that or have any sort of pick and roll coverage on one side, and then have either Asia Wilson or Candace Parker or even Tia Stotts has done a really good job protecting the
She's
rim.
doing a really great job.
Like when you have that, I think that really helps and it can solve any holes that maybe like Kelsey Plum is a little short out on the perimeter, even though she does provide such defensive pressure or any other hole that you could possibly think of. I think Alicia Clark fits in well. I think that just defensively, they're in a great place. Offensively, you said it, you haven't really noticed a whole lot. I guess what are some of the positives that you're seeing from this team offensively?
Definitely a lot of ball movement, which really begins with two terrific passers like Candace Parker and Chelsea Gray being able to really initiate the offense, being able to run pick and roll, with Candace Parker or Asia Wilson being able to slip to the basket. Then of course you got perimeter threats like Jackie Young, Kelsey Plum, who's also able to create their own shot off the dribble and being able to penetrate off the dribble drive. So, I mean, there's just a lot of talent on this team offensively, and like that's why I really see like there's not really many holes honestly, as far as from what I've seen throughout the first 4 games, and I guess you can kind of allude that to, like I said earlier, they haven't really played a true playoff contender. So maybe once they do play against, a lot of the tougher teams like the New Yorks, the Connecticut's, the Washingtons, maybe we may see some flaws. But throughout these first 4 games, I can say, I haven't really seen anything. Right now they're averaging nearly 97 points a game. I think they're like at least, I'm not sure if it's number 1 or number 2, but they are one of the top scoring teams in the W as of right now. So when you have at least like one like the number 1 ranked offense, I mean, there's going to be like really any holes.
So I guess a couple of things that I've noticed, at least from that first game, it was Candace Parker and Asia Wilson almost settling into how they need to play with each other. And I've been a big fan of kind of the inverted pick and rolls with Candace Parker running the point. You mentioned Chelsea Gray and Candace Parker, 2 great passers playing together is a great place to start. But I mean, you can kind of forget that they were playing together in Los Angeles uh, just
That's
a few
true.
years ago, which is a great thing to bring back here to Las Vegas. It helps a lot with Candace Parker joining a new team in the offseason. But like I said, the bid to bid passing is really fun. Candace Parker running some inverted pick and rolls, really fun. Uh, how do you think? I guess it kind of appears that Candace Parker even takes a step back and she's willing to be a spacer when she's out there with Asia. How do you feel about their fit so far?
I think it has had its issues here and there, but I mean it's crazy because it kind of makes me reflect back. I don't know if people remember, but during the Seattle game, I guess Candace was mic'd up, and you can hear her talking to Asia saying, "Hey, do you want me to allow you to play more one on one?" And I think that's very important because I think Candace understands that Asia is definitely to start. Asia is going to be the go-to scorer, so I think that's what allows Candace to say, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to play more at the top of the key. Being able to set screens, being able to pass. Now in the Seattle game, they did have a lot of high low action between Candace and Asia, which I really did like. Asia settling for a position in the post. Candace feeding her the ball and then Asia going to work. So I definitely did like a little bit of that. So I think it's just them two, just figuring out how to not be in each other's way. More so, Candace not being in Asia's way and allowing her to be effective on the offensive end. And then of course, with Candace, being able to space the floor, being able to knock down a few 3-pointers on occasion, even though she's only shooting like 6 or 7 attempts per game. But her just trying to figure out a way to just be effective offensively, not even just scoring, but just from playmaking, from screening. I think that's very important.
Yeah, almost that communication plays a big factor. And Candace Parker at this stage in her career realizes, but she's also going to play a huge role down the stretch because this team, this isn't really what it's about for this team. It's about getting back to that finals and trying to win another championship. So I think you're right. That's another thing, kind of like the defensive miscues that are going to be sorted out. The other thing for me was the zone for Minnesota seemed to cause some troubles for the Aces. How does Las Vegas need to be attacking that zone?
It's crazy. It's crazy. The other day, I actually watched the first half of the Minnesota game. I did get a chance to watch the second half, so probably after this, I'm gonna have to go back. But I could definitely see what you mean as far as Vegas possibly attacking. So I just think that it just needs to be continued ball movement, possibly set some plays to where Asia could possibly catch the ball at the high post, probably in the low post, and just allow her to go to work. Continue to allow Kelsey Plum to move without the ball set pinned down, set stagger screens, set flare screens, do whatever it is that you could possibly do. But I think that's something that they could figure out. Becky Hammond is always really great at implementing her players offensively and allowing them to be effective. So there were some issues per se in that first half against Minnesota, and I could even say possibly in one of the games as well. But I feel like that's something that they can definitely figure out.
Yeah, and I guess lastly, the biggest storyline for this Aces team so far in the season, despite them just being so dominant, has been Jackie Young, and how good she has looked for this squad. Uh, Jackie Young for most improved, MVP candidate, All WNBA. What do you think?
I don't know about the MVP. I don't know. To me, it's really tough, especially when she's playing with so many other players. But I can definitely see most improved. But Jackie Young has been, she's been sensational on the offensive end. I don't think anybody can downplay that. And it's crazy. I think to a lot of people, it has been surprising because I guess you could say Jackie's such a quiet person. So it's like, she's not really. I'm not gonna say she's not outgoing, but she's very low key in a way. She's just all about business. So I think, with people seeing her sort of stuff offensively and being able to shine and be being the number one, being the lead scorer of the team, I think it does catch a lot of people by surprise. But she's averaging around 23 a game. She's shooting around 56% from the 3-point line, 62% from the field. You can't have any numbers that are better than that, honestly, man. Just being able to be effective, from the perimeter, off the dribble, around the mid pull-up jumpers. You can name it. Being able to cut backdoor cuts to the basket. So she's being able to be effective offensively in a multitude of ways that allows Vegas to really be effective. So give credit to Jackie. I could definitely see most improved. I could see All Star, honestly. I could possibly see All Star. If she can continue this resurgence of being All Star once again. So as a Jackie, man, I'm really just excited to see how Becky can continue to keep her involved in the offensive number one option.
Yeah, just listening to the Dunker spot about the Aces and Jackie Young, Steve Jones Jr. was not having any of that Jackie Young most improved player because she did have a lot of that growth last season. But I think you mentioned those
That's
shooting
true.
numbers, the 3-point shooting, just off the charts. And then I think secondly, just to toot my own horn over here, but I really thought Jackie Young was someone who could be have a standout season this year, just because of almost a similarity in her game to Talia Topper, and the addition of Candace Parker, how much that helped Topper. I thought that could really make a big difference for Jackie. I didn't expect this by any means, but I think she's going to continue to have kind of a stellar season. And it's just been really fun for the Aces. Anything else? I just like at full power, is anybody going to beat this team?
Honestly, man, it's almost like, I mean, of course, they're the defending champs, and then of course they add a future Hall of Famer, Candace Parker. But I think there is a possibility. I think a lot of people are expecting a Vegas, New York WNBA finals, which I mean, it could possibly happen, but in my opinion, I think there's a higher chance that it won't happen than it possibly will happen. But I will tell you this though, um, whoever, whichever team, Vegas or the Liberty, if they play Connecticut, in my opinion, like on their journey to the championship, I think that's going to give them a lot of problems. Connecticut is locked in defensively. Alyssa Thomas, actually, I'm going to say this right here. I think Alyssa Thomas has a very high chance of winning MVP this year. That's definitely my hot take. And then, you have players like, Tip Hayes, Letitia Heidemann, DeWanna Bonner. I think, as a unit, they may not have the star power like Aces or the Liberty, but they definitely have that camaraderie. They definitely have that, great ball movement, great shooting. So I think, and then of course, of course the defensive end is where they hang their hat on. So I think if the Aces were running against Connecticut, I'm not saying that they would lose, but I think that would be a very, very competitive 5-game series, especially after what happened last year. I'm sure that's in the back of Connecticut's mind, even though they did lose Jonquil Jones, but they're going to make it a competitive series if that were to happen.
See, that's really interesting. And you point out Alyssa Thomas. Nick, let me tell you, when I had my MVP prediction, I just chose the wrong member of the Connecticut Sun. I had Bree Jones, and I was between her and Alyssa Thomas for that MVP. I do have Alyssa Thomas as my MVP.
Really?
Yeah, I went with Bree Jones. I just thought like down low, she's gonna be able to pile up some of those stats. She's been improving year after year. Alyssa Thomas has been the engine though for this team. But
I could definitely agree with that, man.
yeah, and I had Alyssa Thomas, Defensive Player of the Year. Stephanie White was my Coach of the Year heading in. It's a lot of seasons still left to be played, but so far, Alyssa Thomas looks like a really good candidate for that MVP. And this is a great chance for us to transition to the power rankings as we are wrapping up kind of a week and a half of action, kind of wrapping up week 2 and starting week 3 here soon. But for starters, I mean, we just talked about them a lot. I have Las Vegas, and they're in a category with one other team, in my opinion. What about you? Who's kind of your top tier, and who's number 1?
I would have to go. I would have to go Vegas. I think they've clearly been the best team so far throughout the first few weeks. And like I know that it's still early in the season. They've only played 4 games. A lot of other teams have only played a handful of games. But you just look at how well they've been on both ends. And the communication. It's the score. It's just everything. To me, it's like everything is clicking in. I mean, they definitely have their flaws. We mentioned it earlier in the show, but to me, I just look at this team as they're only going to continue to progress, move forward. There's so many players on this team with high basketball IQs. They're communicating like I mentioned earlier. So, Aces right now, they're definitely my number 1 team. And I mean, to me, in my opinion, like I think it's clear that they've been the best team throughout the first nearly 2 weeks of the season.
I'm right there with you. Do you have them up there with anybody else in kind of that top tier of the power rankings?
I would say definitely Connecticut. New York has definitely turned it around over the last few games. I think they're 3-1 now, 4-1, something like that. The Mystics were struggling a little bit, but I think they'll be up there as well. Which, by the way, I'll be real, Aleda Deladon's playing well, but also Shakira Austin is playing out of her mind as well. I think that could also be another candidate for most improved player. Who knows? But to me, I think it's really just going to be between those four teams. I mean, obviously you got the juggernauts, you got Vegas and the Liberty, but you also have Connecticut and Washington, who, in my opinion, can give those teams some problems as playoff contenders.
Yeah, so kind of in that top tier for me, like we both had the Aces one. I have New York just kind of a step above Connecticut in terms of
Okay.
that top tier. I think, like you said, they've stepped back. They have one game to Washington, which was a really tough game to get started out in. But I think they kind of return to number two in the power rankings for me. Just because like you saw Breanna Stewart's 45 points. Jonquil Jones going to continue to get better as she comes back from that injury. They're going to keep learning each other. Maureen Johannes is back. And like Sabrina
Yes.
Ionescu and Courtney Vandersloot played really well together last night. So, like you said, 3-1, they're kind of a step above, but then I do have Connecticut after that. And as
I mean,
we
that's pretty accurate, man.
Yeah, and I guess I put them above Connecticut because I mean I guess for Connecticut I have a couple of concerns with them. I'm gonna go into a deep dive here soon on a pro basketball show to just kind of break down what we've seen. But they still do sit second best record in the W at 4-1. They've played Indiana a couple of times. They took down Washington, which I was very surprised by in both games. I know that first game could have gone either way. They seem to be in control in that second game. The one loss to New York, I think, also puts them down a peg. But I mean, I still, like you said, am really high on this Connecticut squad, and that leads me to my number four in the power rankings, which is the Washington Mystics. It's tough because they aren't. I believe they're seventh or something like that in the standings at 2-2, and kind of disappointed to start the year. I think there's a lot of basketball left. You already mentioned them in terms of. Do you still think Washington kind of fits up into this top tier of teams?
I do. I do. To me, the confidence came during the preseason when Elena Delle Donne said that she was 100%. Because she's a two-time MVP, she's a WNBA champion, and she's battled throughout her injuries throughout the previous few years. Shout out to Wayne Cole, my guy who actually covers the Mystics, who actually did a story on her, and he talked about how it was hard for her to even like lay down or sit down or anything because the back injuries that she had was just really, really like really taking a toll on her. So now with her coming back 100% healthy, and then it's not even just her. It's the supporting cast. It's like I mentioned Shakira Austin, who was taking the leap in her second year, and now you have a like a tandem backcourt defensively in Natasha Cloud and Brittany Sykes, and then of course Natasha Cloud is a really great playmaker, great scorer as well. Then you got Ariel Atkins and Walker Kimbrough as well. So I think the supporting cast of Washington is really good, and I think that they're only going to continue to improve. But I think with Elena being 100%, I feel like that's what really gets it for me as far as them being in that same conversation as Aces, the Liberty, and the Connecticut Sun.
Yeah, I kind of see obviously the top two in uh, the Aces and the Liberty, but then Connecticut's right there, I think, above Washington. But that's kind of the top four on my end. I'm really curious to see where you go 5 through 8 on this power rankings because it has been a fun early start to the season again, very early. But at this point, who do you kind of have in that fifth spot?
So there's two teams that I'm kind of juggling with as far as for number five. I'll start with this first team, the Dallas Wings, who have gotten up to a good start. Marika Gumbawale, I think the thing about her, I mean, we already know that she's a great scorer. Her shot making is just incredible. But I think what a lot of people may not be paying attention to is the elevation on her on the defensive end. And I think she's locked in on defense, and she's really really showing the effort on that. And I think it allows Dallas to be better. Then of course the emergence of Satu Sabali. I think a lot of people like myself have been waiting for her to really have a good year. She's averaging 22 points a game throughout the first few weeks of the season, and I think that's big. Natasha Howard for the team, a former champion, with Seattle. I think that's really big as well. So Dallas is definitely up there. I love what I've seen from them throughout the first portion of the season, having a really big lineup. Potentially, with Satu being a wing, and then of course having the Cloud and Tierra McCowan in your front court. I think that's really going to be really great. And then another team I would say is the Chicago Sky, which I love this team. And I think a lot of people expecting them to be in rebuild mode because, of course, you lose Candace Parker, Courtney Vandersloot, Allie Quigley. I mean, Allie Quigley's still with the team, but she's not playing. But, when you lose those veteran type players, I think I think that would definitely take a toll on the team. But the one thing that I did say was that, I believe in Kalia Copper, and I was really excited for her to be the number one option. She's a former WNBA Finals MVP. So I was excited to see her take on that leadership role and be the number one option. And then, of course, Courtney Williams, and then Marina Mabry. I love what Dana Evans has done. Dana Evans, to me, has kind of struggled with the shot making, but her defense is just so well. Being able to pick up, the primary ball handler 94 feet and being able to stick with her person, and then, of course, her passing as well, her playmaking has been terrific as well. Elizabeth Williams has been great, crashing glass, and of course, being able to play pick and roll, and being able to get good quality shots. So, to me, those are the probably two teams that I'm kind of juggling with as far as like who can be that fifth spot. So, I'm really interested to see where these two teams go as the season progresses.
Yeah, and so we were in lockstep 1 through 4, and then kind of you brought up Dallas first. I'm not sure where you are on that fifth because I have Chicago right there, and then Dallas
Chicago, okay.
falls into that sixth spot. And I don't know. I guess we start with Chicago for that reason. I think you have to put them ahead of Dallas so far, even though they lost just a game ago, and it's because they took down Dallas just earlier in the season. And so I think they have the strong start. Like you said, all of the veteran talent that they lost, you kind of worry about the front court depth because they bring in the additions of Courtney Williams and a Marina Mabry. But I think Elizabeth Williams has done a great job holding her own down low. Really impressive, stepping into a starting spot after last year in Washington. Obviously, we know she had done this before, I believe, down in Atlanta. But Kali Topper, she did a little bit more comfortable in her new role. Isabel Harrison could help at some point, and then Morgan Birch, Alana Smith, really awesome to see how they've started. Morgan Birch is so
Love
fun.
Alana Smith.
Yes, I almost like the fit of Alana Smith a little bit better, just being able to shoot the three like that. But I do have Chicago ahead of Dallas. Like you said, Dallas, I think Arike has been incredible so far to start the season. A flamethrower at times, sometimes a little bit too much in my opinion. But from talking, I talked to Lowe on the podcast last week, and thought maybe bringing in some more Tierra McCowan down low could help out, like stabilize that. But as you mentioned, Satu Sabali, and that's someone who I thought could step up. Holy cow, is she contributing at a high level? She's been incredible. You mentioned all those pieces, but I do have Chicago just slightly ahead of Dallas for right now. I'm still a little uncertain with Dallas. I think there are a few questions, but it's been a strong start to the year for them, without a doubt. And kind of at this point in the power rankings, who kind of fits into your last two playoff spots of the power rankings?
Man, it's tough. I will say I really like this team. I don't know where they'll finish, but I really like what I've seen from them. Throughout the first portion of the season, and that's the LA Sparks. They got that big win against Phoenix in the first game. Even in the even in the Las Vegas game, they were even able to keep competitive, even without Nneka Ogwumike in that matchup as well. So I love what I've seen from them. The ball movement is spectacular. The screening, the players moving without the ball is great. Lexi Brown was able to shoot the lights out in that Aces game. De'Erica Hamby has played pretty well for them as well. Shanae Ogwumike is probably one of the biggest one of the biggest X factors for me. When she's able to stay healthy, she's able to attack the glass. She's able to, shoot the mid range, being able to score inside. So, I love the Spartans. I think Kurt Miller has done a really good job of, maximizing his players. I don't know exactly where they'll finish. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but if they do, I really wouldn't be surprised though. So I'll definitely say the Sparks. And for the last spot, man, that's tough. Man, that is tough, man. I'm trying to think.
Well, I'm kind of, I guess I'll jump in here because this team is actually seventh on my list, just above LA, who I do have in eighth. But that's the Atlanta Dream. I think
that was exactly who I was gonna kind of go with my A spot, but I wasn't sure yet.
Well, there's been a lot of uncertainty, I think, for Atlanta, and I think that a lot of that starts with kind of their lack of movement on offense. I think they've got a lot of great pieces. I'm a little uncertain at the point guard spot, but Ryan Howard, as we saw last night against Chicago, as well as Alicia Gray, just been awesome so far to start the season. And then a lot of really good forwards, including Haley Jones, who I was really high on heading into the draft. I think maybe she could fit into a point guard spot. But Atlanta, I mean, what do you think about them? As you have them eighth, I have them seventh so far.
I love Atlanta. This is a team that I thought initially was going to make the playoffs last year, but I think now when you add such a talented scorer like Alicia Gray, and of course you add that to the combination of a Ryan Howard who was Rookie of the Year last year, who's also gonna continue to take a leap this year. I love Ari McDowell, the presence that she brings defensively, and then of course playmaking as well. Probably one of my favorite players, Cheyenne Parker, with her ability to crash the glass, with her ability to score in the post, being able to finish inside. So I like Atlanta. I definitely do agree with you. It's kind of a lack of movement, sometimes a lack of ball movement, and I think that's something that Tanisha Wright's going to have to figure out. But I love the young talent that they do have in this team, and I think this is a team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with for a long time to come.
And then at eighth on my list is LA. I'm just gonna agree with you. As I said on my podcast last night with Edwin Garcia, much higher on this team. After where I had them coming into the season, I think they are going to be really good. I love that bid to bid passing. I don't know if they're necessarily part of that top tier of teams, but I think they could very well get close to it. And again, like a lot of three guard lineups there. I'm curious here at kind of our last four. I do have two separate tiers, but where do you rank the top, or I guess 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12 in the league? What order do you have?
9 and 10. Let me think. So I guess you could put Seattle in that conversation.
Oh, okay.
I'm not really too high on Seattle. I don't. I definitely do think that they missed the playoffs this year. Even though this is really the first year of Drew Lloyd really being the number one option, but I just think roster wise, I don't think they have the pieces yet. So I'll go with Seattle, and then I will go with. I feel like there's somebody that I'm missing, man. It's crazy.
I think
Um.
a very tall presence has shown back up in the desert.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely Phoenix. Oh, I can't believe I forgot about that. Phoenix is interesting. Of course, BG got the first few weeks has played phenomenal basketball. I don't know if people have really been paying attention. Just being, I mean, even with her not even being 100%, because I still feel like she has a lot of rust on her. Throughout the first like 2 or 3 games, she shot 73% from the floor, and then her defense was just incredible. Honestly, I mean, even just taking the basketball, just being able to defend on the switch. It just kind of makes me reflect back to the game that they played against Chicago, to where she found herself on a switch against Kalia Copper. And of course, everybody knows Kalia Copper is one of the best slashers, one of the best attackers in the W. So for her to be able to hold her own defensively, then get a lock shot, that's what shows me like, yo, BG is really an elite defensive player. Um, but yeah, to me, I feel like the loss of Skylar Diggins, I don't know if she comes back to the team or you may request a trade. Who knows? But I think her loss, and then I think Sophie Cunningham hasn't really been 100% either. I think she missed a few games, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So we'll just see where health is and where the roster is. But of course, you still have BG, you still have DT on the roster. But I feel like if they don't have all the pieces to the puzzle, I think they just might slightly miss the playoffs.
And Nick, I think you mentioned that kind of 9-10 with Seattle and Phoenix. I presume you have Phoenix just a little ahead of Seattle at this point.
I'll put them ahead of Seattle. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. So
So
I'll have Phoenix 9, and then I'll have Seattle 10.
I am kind of gonna get away from you there because I have that order, but that's my 10-11. I have
Okay,
Indiana slightly above Phoenix right now in terms of what I've liked so far this season.
interesting.
Yes. I was high on Indiana coming into the season, and obviously not a great start when you go up against Connecticut and New York like that. But what we saw and them going and getting a win to break up that 20 game losing streak that was tied for the most ever. That was big time for Aaliyah Boston, who has been awesome. Nelissa Smith as well, especially been a fan of that. I think she could definitely be in contention for that most improved player. at the end of this season. But that front court and what the way they competed against Connecticut just the other night, really a fan of that as well. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they fit around those two front court pieces. I am a fan of Kelsey Mitchell. I think she's a part of that. But we'll see how that goes moving on. But I do have them ahead of Phoenix so far, just because I'm not so sure about the Mercury's depth. I think DT, obviously Brittany Griner being back, phenomenal. Sophie, like you said, kind of in and out. I think Brianna Turner has been kind of a zero on offense. Mariah Jefferson struggled with some turnovers so far. Should Sutton has been incredible over there for Phoenix off the bench.
As
Anya Were, excuse me, playing great defense. I think her in an important role is kind of interesting, but I just don't know if they have exactly what it takes to get back into contention, at least this season. Like you said, Styler Ditton Smith is a huge loss. So yeah, I do have Indiana ahead of Phoenix and then Seattle, and I wrap that up with Minnesota. Seattle, Minnesota are two teams I'm not high on, but I think they kind of settle into 11 and 12. I think likely to stay there all year long. What do you think about that 11-12 spot in my Indiana ranking?
I like the Indiana ranking. I definitely like that a lot. And on top of that, Minnesota's definitely a team that I think is in rebuild mode. So I definitely agree with you. I think they're definitely going to be like the lower tier of the teams in W. Yeah, Indiana is really interesting one to me, man, because I've been really impressed with what I have seen from them throughout this year, or throughout the course of the first part of the season. Aaliyah Boston's already showing qualities of rookie of the year favorite, showing qualities of an all star. If you ask me, and Alyssa Smith, that's an elite front court. I know a lot of people had some concern, because I think the size is a little bit of an issue, but I think Aaliyah has shown that that she could battle with physicality. I think Alyssa has shown that as well. So Indiana has really been a really great team. Or I wouldn't say great team, but they've shown they've shown that they can compete through this first part of the season. They had that game against Connecticut the other night as well. So I'm really interested to see what the future looks like for them, because I feel like Aaliyah and Alyssa are definitely your two players to build around. There was one thing that I wanted to try the experiment that I would love to see if the people will try to experiment is, I wonder if Queen Echo could possibly be inserted into the starting lineup, because I love her rim
Ooh.
protection. I love her activity on defense. Now I don't know if that means that you could possibly have a bigger lineup and putting Alyssa at the 3 and having Aaliyah at the 4, and then possibly putting Queen at the 5, or you might have to swap out either Aaliyah or an Alyssa. But I would love to see that experiment. I don't know if it could be a long term thing, but I love Queen's activity on the defensive end. Being able to block shots, being able to be a great rim protector, and then of course other players as well. I love what Lexi Hill brings to the table. Especially defensively. I love how scrappy she is. Now she has struggled from the perimeter at times, but I love how she makes it forward with her fight and her hustle. And then of course Grace as well. I love what Grace brings to the table offensively as well, with her playmaking and her scoring. So Indiana's a really fun young team to watch. I know they only have one win so far this year, but if you've watched them play, they've been super competitive, against Connecticut twice, and then of course, and that big one against Atlanta. I know they got blown out against New York, but they've shown qualities of these players on the team, these young players on the team, like they have a really bright future at WNBA. I'm just super excited to see what the future holds for them.
I think that Queen Edbo into the starting lineup makes a ton of sense. I really want to see how that works now. I was thinking maybe like a trade for a center who could shoot to pair alongside, like maybe a Hanshu to pair alongside Aaliyah Boston
That
and
could be interesting.
Melissa Smith. But I think Queen Edbo makes a lot of sense just from a defensive perspective. I think she'd be able to hold her own out on the perimeter pretty well. So that's fascinating to think about. I like that idea. I agree with you. It's been a lot of fun in Indiana. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they go along with the rest of that rotation, the rest of the season, and for years to come. But that's why I do have them ninth. Phoenix, they were obviously able to get that first win. It was over Minnesota, but I just don't know if they have it. And then Seattle, I like a lot of their young players. Jewel Lloyd has been awesome, as always, going to be a really fun player to watch this season. I want to see a little bit more from Ezzy Matador, Jordan Horston
Same.
too. I'd just like to see a little more go to her a little more, whether it's on the post or give her some on ball creation chances. But Jordan Horston's been fun. And I'm just not sure where else a lot of positives come for Seattle. So that's why I do kind of have them in 11th. How does your 11-12 wrap up here on this power rankings?
Both, I can't even remember who I had before. I got Seattle 9. Actually, now that you mentioned it, so I would say I'll probably put Phoenix 9 because of the experience. I'll probably say Phoenix 9, even though I don't really have any expectations for them, but I'll put them there not experience. Then I'll put Indiana 10 because I love the competitive the goodness that they've shown the first start of the season. And then I'll say Seattle 11, and then I'll say Minnesota 12 to wrap it up.
So I think we kind of talked ourselves into a very similar power ranking so far, but not a lot of games to base that off of, as we are still very early in the season. But that's kind of where we have it with Las Vegas, New York, Connecticut, Washington, and that top tier. We differed a little bit with Chicago and Dallas, Atlanta and LA. Both, I think we flipped both of those. We talked ourselves into Phoenix, Indiana, Seattle, and Minnesota to close things out. But I'm really interested to see how that goes near the middle of the power rankings in terms of playoffs at the end of the year. But a lot of fun basketball and a lot potentially to change here after an early start to the season. I think where you're going to see some teams start to take off, hopefully like in Atlanta or Phoenix. They always have a slow start, and at some point will pick things up. I think LA could pop up the standings for sure, but it's going to be up and down. But that's kind of where we're at. Any other points you kind of want to make on these power rankings?
Not mentioning it, man. I think that 5-6 will be very, very competitive. I think it's gonna remain those two teams, both Chicago and Dallas. So, we'll see as the season progresses, which team could possibly have that edge. But I think both those teams are kind of like I guess you could say they are contenders, but they're like kind of like borderline contender, compared to the Aces, the Liberty, the Sun, and then of course the Mystics. So I'm really interested to see how both of these teams can continue to develop and continue to progress as the season moves on.
And I think I'm just gonna throw this out there. I've been impressed watching LA so far. I think maybe they could slide into that 5-6 conversation as well. But yeah, really excited. Yeah, it could go really any which way at this point. But Nick, hey, thank you so much for joining me here. I know we had to talk Las Vegas at some point with their start. And then I wanted to do some power rankings. It was fun to kind of touch on each team so far. But yeah, thank you for joining the a pro basketball show for this episode.
No problem, man. It's always a pleasure to come on, talk, especially WNBA, man. I mean, this is something that I'm just super passionate about. I love watching this league. I love watching the players, continue to grow and develop as the season goes on. So, it's always a good thing to come on podcast and talk W, man. So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Go check out Nick Andre at MNC Hoops. Check out his podcast. He writes about literally everything. He's doing all of the work. So a huge shout out to him for joining us. But that's where we're at here with the power rankings and the Aces so far this season. Thank you so much for joining.
All right. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much for tuning into a pro basketball show. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram with more coming soon. Until next time, I'm Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.